Hi all, this is Nelly, Ordinary People Saintly Souls, and I continue to paraphrase, summarize and read to you from the visions of Maria Valtorta, the Italian mystic. And now I tell you about what she saw about the time of Jesus dying and the natural disasters that were happening around the time of his last breath. The sky becomes duller and duller, she describes, and this is where Jesus says to John that Mary is his mother, and that and she says that to Mary that John is her son. And Valtorta describes that the sky becomes really strange. She says it's like of a cone that seems of slate, so dark is it, and that rises like a pine tree from behind the top of a mountain. It looks like a water spout. It rises and rises and seems to produce darker and darker clouds. And Jesus' suffering increases more and more, and the light fades more and more. And Nicodemus and Joseph appear, and they say, step aside to the crowd, and they go up because they say, we are the friends of Christ. And they are there at the moment that Jesus dies, and I'll come back to them in a minute. So they now also start to abuse these two, Nicodemus and Joseph, but Joseph says, or Nicodemus says, Israel is so corrupt that you cannot even recognize God anymore. And it gets darker and darker. The light is now like dark ashes, and people can't see very well anymore. And only those who are at the foot of the cross can see it. And Mary utters a cry and says, he's dead. And then they start to scream, it's not possible. It is a simulation to make us go away. Soldier, prick him with your lance. It's a good medicine to give his voice back to him. But the soldiers don't do that. And so then they start to throw stones again. And they hit Jesus. And they fall on the armor of the Romans. And Jesus recovers momentarily, and he moans, and his head moves from left to right, and his body stiffens on a cross. She also describes at great length how he is really terribly pained by cramps, and how he can no longer control movements in his body. Some parts of his body are twitching and moving, and some parts of the body seem dead. And this is where Jesus suddenly opens his eyes and cries out, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani. God, oh God, why did you desert me? And so he must be dying. He must feel he's dying, and he feels absolutely abandoned by heaven. And the people laugh and deride him. They insult and say, God has nothing to do with you. Demons are cursed by God. And others shout, let us see whether Elijah, whom he is calling, will come to save him. And so Jesus seems to feel very oppressed and abandoned. And the darkness becomes deeper. Jerusalem disappears completely. And that is when you hear the voice of Jesus say, I am thirsty, and where they feed him or give him the famous vinegar and gall. Jesus is very thirsty, but then he makes a wry face in disgust. It doesn't seem to taste very good. And he withdraws, loses heart, and abandons himself. And the weight of his body falls heavily on his feet and forward. So he seems to be hanging forward. His body from his hip upwards is detached from the cross and remains so. His head hangs forward, and his breathing starts to sound more and more like the death rattle. Now and again, a painful fit of coughing brings a light rosy foam to his lips, and his thorax heaves laboriously and with difficulty. So he's still breathing, but with great difficulty. And fainter, sounding like a child's wailing comes the invocation, "Mother, mother." And the poor wretch whispers, "Yes, darling, I'm here." And when his sight becomes misty and makes him say, "Mother, where are you? I cannot see you anymore. Are you abandoning me as well?" Mary is there and says, "No, no, son, I will not abandon you. I am here. Listen to me, my dear. Your mother is here. She is here. And she only regrets that she cannot go where you are." John weeps openly, and Longinus stands stiff in attention, his left hand on his sword, and his face is affected in the effort of overcoming his emotion, and his eyes begin to shine with tears, and he can only refrain them with his iron discipline. There is dead silence, and then the utter cry, "Everything is accomplished," is clearly heard, and the death rattle grows louder and louder. And Jesus breathes his last breath, and all the women are starting to cry, but there's a silence, and then again they hear, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." So they thought it was his last breath, but it's not yet. And this is the last spasm of Jesus. His body in dreadful convulsion seems to tear with the 3 nails from the cross and rises 3 times from the feet to the head, and then falls down, and with a loud cry that is mentioned in the Gospels, he cries the word "mother" and nothing else, and his head falls on his chest. And then nature starts to react. I can just summarize it a little bit. Lightning strikes, and the crowd is struck directly. The earth is shaken, like there is a big earthquake. Longinus, John, and the soldiers have to grab whatever they can, as best as they can, not to fall. And John grasps the cross, and with the others supports Mary. The robbers howl with terror. The crowd howls even more and would like to run away, but there's nowhere to run anymore. People fall one on top of the other. They tread on one another. They fall into the fissures of the ground. They hurt themselves. They roll down the slopes as if they've gone mad. The earthquake and the tornado recur 3 times, and there are flashes of lightning, and those flashes of lightning continue. And Mary starts to cry, saying, "I no longer have my son." Mary of Magdalene sits where John was and lays Mary on her knees to console her. All the women gather around her to wipe her brow and her face. And the soldiers start to comment on what is happening and say, "Did you see the crowd? Now they are afraid. They were beating their breasts. They were all terrorized. And there's fire in the country, but he's really dead. Can't you see? There's no doubt." And so there is when Joseph and Nicodemus appear and say, "We want the corpse." Because technically, the proconsul can only grant the corpse, because it is the practice to fracture the legs, and they don't want Jesus' legs to be fractured. So Longinus allows them to go and ask permission not to break Jesus' legs and to take his body. And so Longinus says, "I will wait." And while he is waiting, Longinus starts to reflect. And he said, "It is done, my friends, better so. As for a night," this is Knijht, and with fracturing bones. He was really a just man. So Longinus's great admiration for Jesus. And then comes Gamaliel. He climbs up the hill, he looks ragged, and he says, dreadful things happened. I was in the temple, and the sign, the temple door unhinged, the purple veil is hanging torn, the Holy of Holies is open, there is anathema upon us. And in the country between the mountain and the walls, and between them many people look idiotic, and they're wandering. And they're howling and weeping and say, his blood has rained fire. Or they say, Jehovah has appeared in the midst of the lightning to curse the temple. Or they moan, the sepulchres, the graves. Because it seems that some saw the graves open and they imagined that the dead were walking among them. They have gone mad, says Nicodemus. And so Nicodemus, who is dressed in a white woolen coat, because he took out his other coat that is of another color, to be quicker, makes the Pharisees cry out with terror because they think he's a ghost. And but he only comes to ask permission to keep Jesus' body. And they say, I'm afraid. They're all mad. So Gamaliel, now we go back to Gamaliel. The vision goes back to Gamaliel, who goes to the cross and talks, the sign, tell me you forgive me. He thinks Jesus is still alive. A whisper, even only a whisper, to tell me that you hear me and forgive me. But he changes his mind only when a soldier pushing him with his lance says, get up and be silent, it's of no use. You should have thought of that previously. He's dead, and I, a heathen, am telling you, this man whom you have crucified was really the Son of God. Dead? Are you dead? Oh, Gamaliel raises his terrorized face, and then he kneels down, stretches his arm out, and weeps, saying, it was you, we can no longer be forgiven. We have asked your blood upon us, and it cries to heaven, and heaven curses us. Oh, but you were mercy, I say so. I, the destroyed rabbi of Judah, your blood is on us for pity's sake. Sprinkle us with it, because only your blood can bring us forgiveness. And he weeps. And then in a lower voice, he confesses his torture. I have the requested sign, but ages and ages of spiritual blindness are upon my interior sight. And again my present will, and against my present will rises the voice of my proud thought of the past. Have mercy on me. Light of the world, let one of your rays descend on the darkness that did not understand you. I am the old Judean, faithful to what I thought was justice, and it was error. I am now a barren land, no longer with any of the ancient trees and the ancient faith. Work a miracle of making a flower that has your name spring up. So then he quotes Isaiah. Gamaliel quotes Isaiah and says, he paid for sinners and took upon him the sins of many. Oh, also mine, Jesus of Nazareth. He stands up, he looks at the cross. And then Nicodemus and Joseph arrive, and they have the permission of Pilate, and they then want to take the body down. But again, there is the issue of breaking the legs, and Longinus has the idea to pierce Jesus with his spear to see if he's truly dead. And so John climbs up on the cross and helps with unnailing Jesus and bringing him down. So several men on different ladders go on the cross, stand against the cross and bring him down, and then place him in his mother's lap, the famous picture that we all have seen in many paintings and Pietà by Leonardo da Vinci, and Jesus' head is resting on his mother's shoulder. And then from there they will go and bury Jesus. This was Nelly, Ordinary People, Saintly Souls. Thank you for joining this on this horrifying journey. I really appreciate it, because what Maria Valtorta saw is really worse than we ever can imagine.